And so the celebrations start in earnest there at KaNyamazane Stadium in Mpumalanga. And this, of course, is the EFF celebrating their 6th anniversary in the province. And the party is now the official opposition in that province after the last elections, doubling its support since 2014's elections. And the president, or the commander-in-chief of the party, Julius Malema, speaking as charismatically as he does, and one can see that that stadium is full, a huge following, not just in Mpumalanga but across the country. And this party has shown phenomenal growth since it was formed on the 26th of July 2013, and strong messages coming through from the commander-in-chief of the EFF in his speech there, and saying that, look, we heard you, you've heard us, and that's why you have shown faith in us and making us the official opposition in this province. And he carried on saying, why are we here? Well, 367 years ago, our land was taken, our people were killed, and our message is that we want our land back. We had hopes that 1994, that things would change, that we'd reached a turning point, but things are actually worse now because the ruling party is collaborating with the enemy. We are the children of Fidel Castro, Winnie Mandela. Nobody can destroy this 26th July movement. But he did warn his followers that the knives are out for us because we are the ones fighting for the people. Many have tried to bring us down, and many have said things about us, saying that we would be finished as a party after Jacob Zuma left. But we are still here. And we march, and we continue to march. He gave a strong warning to Pravin Gordhan, said that Malusi Gigaba is gone, Nhlanhla Nene is gone, you will go too, but warned the president that we're not saying we are calling for your resignation now or that you need to go now, but be warned, stop listening to bad advice from white people. You are a victim of white monopoly capital, perhaps unwittingly. And they said that we see injustice everywhere, and our job is to make sure that we go after it. We are not afraid. And he said to black South Africans, we are together. Be warned, these people do not like us. Then he had a very strong message about the continent, one that has been consistent, saying that this is one continent, one people. He said, I'm not Zimbabwean, I'm not South African, I'm not Zimbabwean, I'm not Mozambican, I'm African. And he says that you cannot say that you want decolonization but promote the borders of the colonizers, saying that you cannot allow people to divide us as Africans. And then he had a strong word again against the beating of children, the beating of women. He says, how can you do that? What's wrong with you? And he says that anybody who does that in the EFF is a coward. He went and attacked, of course, the former premier of the Mpumalanga province, Didi Mabuza, who's now deputy president, saying that a lot of the corruption in this province can be traced back to his door. And then Johan Rupert also got a mention, saying that we need to assist him to leave the country. All right, so, and then the financial sector, of course, they said they think they're untouchable, but we must show them. So, fiery speech, again motivating his fighters, a movement that's grown in size and stature significantly over time. And to help us unpack all of this in this speech and what it means for the party 6 years down the line, I'm joined in studio here by Professor Barry Hanyane. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Professor Barry Hanyane is a teacher, lecturer, public management and governance at the Northwest University Potchefstroom campus. So it's a lot of it, perhaps what we expect now. We've heard Julius Malema speak in the past. His message has been consistent over time. What are your thoughts about what you heard?
Well, look, for starters, you pointed quite rightly to say there's an element of consistency. But for me, there's also an element of wanting to consolidate the EFF's position on the right side of our political spectrum. This can be done in a number of ways, through populist stance, at times a rhetoric position on key controversial issues. I don't think it's a party that wants to stay away from that. Let's not forget that this is one party that woke up Parliament and said the issue of the land cannot be sidelined. This is the time to deal with it. Much to the dismay, to a large degree, of the politics on the left. And interestingly enough, we've seen a resurgence of that thanks to post-8th of May elections, that a number of parties there, in particular EFF Plus, is beginning to gain support as a way of countermeasuring what is happening and what is obviously progressing on the right. So all in all, it's the EFF stance that we've got known to in the last 6 years. Right. And I think going forward, this is a party that would want to be seen as a party on the right side of the revolutionary history, making sure that its members toe the line. We've seen and we've heard that strong message directed straight at its members from the CIC himself. So I'm not surprised at what the message is today, but perhaps going forward, the issue that they have with Pravin Gordhan might take a slightly different shape. I'm a little bit taken aback by the fact that in today's speech, the anti-Gordhan rhetoric didn't take too much shape and some kind of strength in terms of rallying support on that issue alone. I suppose the response from the presidency may have well dampened the kind of expectation that this party was seeking in relation to that aspect. But yes, a typical position taken by the CIC, direct to audience, and of course a message that augurs well with the youth of the country.
All right. We're also joined from our studio in Durban by Dr. Sizwe Medulla, who's also an expert in leadership. Let's cross to him now. Professor Medulla, Dr. Medulla, your take on the Commander-in-Chief of the EFF, his leadership again, I suppose what we are used to. How strong was his message in your view today?
Well, we must congratulate the EFF.
All right, Dr. Carry on.
We must congratulate the EFF for its 6th year celebration. It's not an easy thing to sustain an organization like that. Many organizations, they are formed, but they can't even make 3 years or even 5 years. Well, it is not a surprise from Julius Malema. We know that he is a person who is very radical, is very militant. That is his strategy that he has been using since the inception of the organization. Unfortunately, it's not all the time the strategy that is useful, because at times it becomes very reckless, it becomes impetuous, he becomes obnoxious, and sometimes this radicalism is not good for himself or even for the organization.
But
however,
Medulla, let me just interrupt you there, because what you're saying is at odds with the numbers. You know, if I was a businessman and I was looking at a startup in 2013, I'd have seen this company called EFF, and the performance that it's shown over 6 years, I would invest in that company. So perhaps it might be that his message is hitting the right tone with the right people, even if perhaps you as an analyst might not resonate with it.
Indeed, we must congratulate him, because Indeed, we must congratulate him because what he has done since the inception of the EFF in 2013, they've managed to target a market and the group And they focused on that, especially the young adults, the poor, the downtrodden, the unemployed, the landless, and they speak a certain language which resonate with these people. And whenever he speaks, at least these people hear, and then they can connect with him.
All right. Okay. There's another guest that we have actually who's joining us via Skype, a political analyst, Julius Werner. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. And I suppose you've just also heard this speech, and it's one that in many ways we've heard him say a few times. But the message, he keeps, I suppose, emphasizing the same points, what the party is about, what it stands for, from land to the position on Africa and fighting corruption, and naming those people that are an enemy in his view.
Yes. Am I coming through fine?
Yes, you're coming through fine. Your reaction?
Thank you. Yeah, no, as you say, the speech is very consistent with what we've heard in the past. Obviously, after some time, the EFF has got to also give some very clear details on their main point, which is this economic freedom. Land alone, taking land alone, does not tell us much about how the economy becomes transformed. But I also want to agree that the EFF itself has changed the political landscape fundamentally. There is a lot of movement on corruption in South Africa, anti-corruption movement. They've boosted the efforts of the DA by bringing in credibility of an anti-corruption stand that comes from the left and also from the black community. They promised to remove Jacob Zuma, and I think we can give them credit that they contributed significantly towards the removal of Jacob Zuma. They proposed movement on the land issue. The movement on the land issue, nobody can deny that the EFF is a major force in South African politics. What is difficult going forward for them is they would want to perhaps replace the DA as the official opposition. They also want to replace the ANC, the party. Right now, they've been entering into an alliance of some kind with the DA, which has basically hit problems. It looks like their alliance with the ANC is also not as strong as they want it to be. So they have to come up and be an independent major force in the next 10 years or so.
All right, let's come back to the studio and you, Prof. You know, sometimes when a new thing happens, a new product gets to market, it's sometimes luck that you get the timing right.
Yeah.
And that you bring a product that people perhaps are yearning for and not quite sure what it is that they were looking for, and suddenly it hits them. Yeah. Do you think that I mean, you know, when I look at them now and I see this uniform, that it was not a chance thing. They knew what they were doing, the name of the party, they knew what they're doing, and the message right from day one gets a sense that it was carefully planned. Yeah. Do you think that they had a very good idea of the yearnings on the ground, that they've been able to get off the ground so quickly and grow as fast as they have?
Well, look, we shouldn't be surprised. I mean, much of the brain contribution, if I may call it that way, for lack of a better description, comes from the ANC's youth front, when Julius Malema and Floyd Shivambu and others were expelled. So this, in a sense, became an immediate gain on their part to say, if the message that we held which basically was to advance radical politics within the ANC, cannot find expression within the mother body itself, surely there must be a space elsewhere to express the same political perspective. And it should not come as a surprise, basically, to acknowledge today and realize that that space was forever there, and theirs was to sit back and say, right, from the ANC's youth front, how do we tweak this to find much broader resonance to a number of disenfranchised youth? You speak here of retrenched workers, you speak of those who are not earning much in the form of your house helpers and so forth. And so it shouldn't come as a surprise. What should be something of note in terms of credit is the fact that as part of their branding, they were able to lift themselves immediately and appeal to the youth, as your question puts it indirectly. And for that, we should give them credit. But what we should give credit for is how they advance their political approach to broader issues in the country, realizing that ANC's failures was nothing else but short of creating a fertile ground for radical politics to thrive. And here we are, we're seeing this. Whether in the next 10 years or so, this kind of trajectory will maintain the EFF, it's another cause for debate. And I think would rather park this question now and observe exactly what the current situation offers.
For them to govern this country, they're going to have to get the buy-in of much older voters as well.
Yeah.
And one gets a sense sometimes that they're perhaps a little bit too much for people that have grown up on conservative politics.
That's right.
How do they cross that bridge?
It's going to be difficult. My take, we're going back to the earlier question that I thought we would avoid a little bit. My take is you're dealing here with a possible or not so possible shift of generational politics. Rightly so, those who are seen as either seasoned followers or seasoned politicians might not find some kind of relationship with this kind of political perspective, radicalism, versus, as you say, conservative, traditional way of handling issues. But here's an interesting part. The majority of other parties, i.e. in this instance, the ANC, is made up of seasoned politicians and activists who are likely to move away from the political platform. Whether this will give room for the growth of the EFF, it's something else. It is possible, unless if, of course, other political developments as time goes on does actually shape the general polity of the country.
All right, Dr. Medulla, I want to track and trace the growth of this party, and I'm making these business analogies because I follow them quite easily. When I think of Virgin, the company, one thinks of Richard Branson straight away. And we feel about Virgin as we feel about the person, Richard Branson. One gets a sense that the EFF could be the same, that the charisma and the draw of the party has a lot to do with the personalities, whether it's Julius Malema, Floyd Shivambu, Goodrich Gadi, Dalimpofu. How can they use this, but at the same time, not fall prey to the idea that it's just about personalities? Yes. Hello, Dr. Medulla.
Yes, I agree with you, Peter. They've grown quite substantially and exponentially since the inception on the 26th July 2013. When the party was formed, they had about 1,200 delegates, which converged at Uncle's Tom, Orlando West in Soweto. And indeed, they've grown so exponentially since then. Personality has played a pivotal role. Passion, charisma, because Malema is a very charismatic leader. He is a very inspirational leader. He's that kind of a leader people would like to listen to. When he speaks, whether you agree with him or you don't agree with him, you would like to listen to him. So he has managed to attract and retain people because of his charisma and because of his personality. And actually, mostly that's what happens to organizations we would call the first generation organizations. Those organizations are the ones who are led and run by their founders. So it begins to change when a succession takes over. But when the person who was established or founded that organization, charisma and personality plays a very, very important role. But also passion as well, because you've got to be very passionate about your organization, about what we have started. So that's what we see and get from Julius Malema. And also to be surrounded by very good people. And I think his top 6 is the people really who are like-minded, and their policies as well. They are consistent with what they've been saying all along since 2013. So we must congratulate him. He has managed to keep the organization thus far.
Mr. Swana, one of the things that comes through in his speeches as well, whilst he often attacks the opposition, the other parties, he's also very firm and strong about what he expects from his own party members, his fighters, gender-based violence, xenophobia. He's very strong, and he tells them that if that's how you think, we don't want you in our party. Mr. Swana? All right, it seems that we've lost a bit of audio there. Perhaps you can pick that up. You know.
Yeah. Look, here's the danger, and I think it's characteristic of African politics generally. It is centered around key figures who would want to rally a party and become the face of that party. The danger is what happens if there is no succession plan? And what happens if, God forbid, he becomes physically and otherwise incapacitated to lead the party? Who then is able, and rightly so, at a flick of a moment, fill in those shoes? It becomes a very difficult position to deal with. And I think the issue of actually labeling the CIC by those who are opposed to his politics as some demigod of some sort does in a sense find expression at a time when his power, his authority, his voice, his command of following becomes somewhat of a bigger force than what it would in terms of incorporating the other individuals around him. You don't hear much around Advocate Mpofu lately, and you wonder why. No wonder why people like Ndlozi, Dr. Ndlozi, are now given the pseudo title of being the ice boy. These are the kind of things that I think as leadership, you've got to deal with them and make sure that somewhat the attention is spread throughout, so that in a sense it is the party first and not necessarily the individual first. All
right, okay. Well, let's now go to Mpumalanga, where our reporter Abongile Dumako's been there following the events unfold.